I'm so beaten down and defeated by life. That drive that I once had, that's gone now.
In Plymouth, England, what seemed like a normal coastal city became the scene of a tragedy that could have been prevented. The story of Jake Davison isn't just about one person who did something terrible. It's about what happens when mental health support fails and warning signs get ignored.
He was a troubled young man, unhappy with the hand life had dealt him. But what turned the disgruntled Jake Davison into a mass killer?
When somebody desperately needs help but can't get it, when family members raise alarms but nobody listens, and when systems meant to keep people safe break down, the results can be devastating. Jake Davison grew up in Plymouth with his single mom, Maxine. Like many families, they struggled with money and lived in government housing. But their story isn't just about financial hardship. It's about what happens when a family desperately needs help but keeps hitting dead ends at every turn. From when Jake was very young, something wasn't right. Maxine could see her son was having difficulties that went beyond normal childhood struggles. She did what any caring parent would do. She got help. This led to Jake being diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. This diagnosis should have opened doors to all kinds of support, special education programs, counseling, family assistance. The family couldn't afford private care, so they had to rely on public services that were already overwhelmed. Jake ended up at Mount Tamar, a special needs school that was doing its best despite severe underfunding. Picture a lifeguard trying to save people while someone keeps taking away their equipment. That's what these schools face every day. For Maxine, raising Jake became increasingly isolating. Months-long waiting lists and constant rejections put immense pressure on both mother and son, creating tensions in their relationship that would later play a devastating role in what happened. This was just the beginning of a pattern that would repeat throughout Jake's life. Problems would arise, help would be needed, but that help would either come too late or not at all.
As you get older and you get ground down, I try, and I always keep trying. But it's like, I'm at the point now where it's like, why do I even bother? Like, for what?
As Jake got older, the social challenges he faced became more and more obvious. Being a teenager is hard for anyone. Trying to figure out where you fit in, making friends, dealing with all those awkward social situations. But for Jake, his autism made these everyday teenage struggles feel like climbing a mountain. While other kids were hanging out at lunch or after school, Jake found himself increasingly alone. That's when the internet became his escape. Online, Jake didn't have to worry about maintaining eye contact or reading social cues. He could take his time responding to people. He could be whoever he wanted to be. At first, this seemed like a solution to his loneliness. But the internet can be like quicksand. The deeper you sink into certain communities, the harder it becomes to pull yourself out. Jake started spending more and more time on the forums where people shared dark views about life. He found himself drawn to discussions about guns, philosophy that focused on how meaningless life is, and particularly to groups called Incels, guys who blamed their inability to find romantic relationships on everyone but themselves. Jake wanted to lose his virginity, yet instead of meeting people who would pep talk him into it, he met people who told him he would never achieve his goal, as women are superficial and don't want men who look like him.
Of course women care more about looks. This is just some quick, shitty little initial reaction video, but of course they do, Absolutely. That women are biologically set up to care more about looks.
These online spaces felt like they were giving Jake answers as to why his life was so difficult. When he posted about feeling rejected or angry, other users would tell him he was right to feel that way.
I'm so beaten down and defeated by life. That drive that I once had, that's gone now. It's gone, it's literally gone. Like, I don't have the power anymore. I don't have that willpower anymore. I can't sit there and force myself to be like, right, let's do this. We'll work towards, we'll keep going, yes. Muscle through it, I just can't do that anymore.
When he expressed negative thoughts about women or society, people would agree and encourage these views.
Just looking at a girl, I could feel it, just like, and I did have girls into me. I had girls into me. I had them into me. stupid, ridiculous mental barriers.
Instead of finding real support or learning healthy ways to deal with his feelings, Jake was falling into digital spaces that just made his anger and isolation worse. What started as a way to finally feel less alone ended up pushing him further away from real connections and deeper into a dangerous mindset. Think of it like this. Imagine you're feeling down, and instead of finding friends who help lift you up, you find people who convince you that being down is all you'll ever be. That's what happened to Jake in these online communities. The very thing that was supposed to help him connect with others ended up trapping him in a bubble of negativity that would have terrible consequences. In 2016, when Jake was 17, he attacked a pregnant woman and her partner on the street, punching the man almost 20 times. This was a serious, violent attack that came out of nowhere. You'd think an incident this severe would have triggered immediate help. Counseling, mental health evaluation, some kind of intervention, but nothing happened. Due to mistakes in how the police handled the case, the incident wasn't properly recorded. Nobody followed up, nobody connected the dots. A massive red flag just disappeared into the system. The following year, Jake's family tried desperately to get him mental health help through Britain's National Health Service. They could see his mental state getting worse and did exactly what they were supposed to do. They reached out for professional help. But again, what they found instead was a system that just couldn't cope with demand. This is where the system really broke down. Not just in one place, but everywhere. The mental health services were overwhelmed, too many people needing help, and not enough resources to help them. The police system that should have flagged Jake as someone needing intervention after his violent attack had dropped the ball. Each part of the system that failed made the other problems worse, and Jake's deteriorating mental health fell through all of these gaps. The most shocking part of this story might be how Jake was ever allowed to own a gun in the first place. In the UK, getting a firearms license isn't like getting a driver's license. You need a really good reason to have one. Usually, this means you're a farmer protecting livestock, you're involved in sport shooting, or you have another legitimate purpose. Jake had none of these reasons, yet somehow in 2018, his application was approved. This wasn't just a paperwork mistake, think about it. If someone applied for a pilot's license but had no training and no plan to fly planes, you'd expect that application to be rejected immediately. That's how strange it was for Jake to get the gun license. The system that is supposed to keep dangerous weapons out of the wrong hands had a massive blind spot. Things got even worse in 2020. Jake got into a serious fight with some teenagers in public, the kind of incident that should absolutely make authorities question whether someone should have access to firearms. And finally, the police did what they should have done in the first place. They took away his gun license and his weapon. But here's where things went terribly wrong again. Just by completing an anger management course, Jake was able to get his license and his gun back in July 2021. This happened despite his own mother begging authorities to check on his mental state. Imagine a parent being so worried about their child that they ask the police to step in, and then watching those concerns be brushed aside. The system wasn't listening. What makes this even more frustrating is that no one bothered to look at Jake's social media activity during this process. In 2021, when most people's lives are partially lived online, the authorities didn't think to check what he was posting or saying on the internet. They didn't see his concerning posts, his alignment with dangerous ideologies, or the warning signs that were hiding in plain sight. One of the most important pieces of this history is how Jake got pulled into what is called the Incel community online. Incel stands for involuntarily celibate. It's a group of people, mostly men, who believed that they can't find romantic relationships. The Black Pill Incel community, which Jake was an active part of, believes they're romantically unsuccessful because of their looks.
The reality is, and this is my view, I think a big portion of people don't realise the black pill doesn't just apply to incels, guys. It applies to a lot of guys. These days, not having sex for 6 months or a year for a lot of guys is very, very common.
But this isn't just about dating struggles. These online spaces promote a really dark view of the world called black pill thinking. Imagine someone telling you that your entire life is determined by how you look, that nothing you do matters, and that you should be angry at the world for it. That's what Jake found in these communities. For someone already struggling with mental health and feeling isolated, these ideas can be like poison. Instead of learning healthy ways to deal with rejection or build better relationships, Jake found a community that told him his problems weren't his fault, they were everyone else's fault. Jake started his own YouTube channel called Professor Waffle, where you can really see how these ideas took over his thinking. He posted videos talking about how he deserved relationships but couldn't get them, and how he was becoming more and more angry at women, including his own mother. What do incels think of their mother? Jake can't stand her. When you look at his videos over time, you can see him getting pulled deeper and deeper into these harmful beliefs. It's like watching someone sink into quicksand. Each video showed him becoming more bitter, more resentful, and more convinced that the world was against him.
A lot of women are very simple-minded and they ain't all that bright. You know, social media and thinking they're princesses and all this, they grow up. A lot of women are quite simple-minded. The only thing they understand is that. You know, you talk about intelligence, smartness, you know, women don't give a f*** about none of that. Unless you got that. You know, do you think they care about the little f***ing autistic kid in the corner who's won the Mathematical International Olympiad or whatever the hell? They don't give a f***. If they said, oh yeah, the winning prize is $1.5 million, they'll care then.
This is one of the scariest parts of the internet age. Someone who's struggling can easily find communities that don't help them get better. Instead, they make them feel worse while convincing them it's normal to feel that way. For mental health workers and police, this creates a huge challenge. How do you help someone who's being influenced by harmful online communities? How do you even know it's happening before it's too late? It's especially hard because these communities often tell their members not to trust mental health professionals or authority figures, creating a barrier to getting real help. Here's what Jake said in his last online post.
I know it's a movie, but you know, I like to think sometimes, you know, I'm a Terminator or something, and despite reaching almost total system failure, he keeps trying to accomplish his mission, you know?
What happened on August 12, 2021 would take just 6 minutes, but would forever change countless lives and expose how badly the system had failed not just Jake, but an entire community.
A yellow tent tells you where, but not yet why, his victims were chosen. In Plymouth, police search for answers which may never truly be found.
It started with an argument at home. Jake and his mother Maxine had been fighting more and more as she tried to challenge his increasingly hostile views towards women. These weren't just normal family disagreements, they were signs of how far Jake had fallen into dangerous ways of thinking. The very person who had fought hardest to get him help, who had begged authorities to see that her son needed support, would become his first victim when he picked up his shotgun. He left her dead in her bedroom. Then he reloaded and went out on Biddick Drive. There, Lee Martin was having one of those precious everyday moments with his 3-year-old daughter Sophie, the kind that parents treasure. Just a simple walk together on a summer evening. When they encountered Jake, Lee did what any parent would do. He tried to shield his little girl. Both father and daughter lost their lives in that moment. A devastating reminder of how violence doesn't just take lives, it steals futures. The violence continued through the neighborhood like a dark wave crashing through normal life. Ben Parsonage and his mother Michelle were wounded, but survived. They'll carry both physical and emotional scars from that day. Stephen Washington was just walking his dogs in the park, something he probably did every day without thinking twice about it. Kate Shepard was outside a hair salon, another person just going about her daily life. These weren't people in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were exactly where they should have been, doing exactly what people do every day. Jake took 5 innocent lives and left 2 more injured. When another man saw him unalive Kate, he said, "Nothing to worry about, mate." Then he entered a parking garage, threatened some people there, and then turned the firearm on himself. He was his 6th and final victim.
Another shocking fact to emerge this morning, Davison was the holder of a firearms license. How he got that and the type of gun he managed to get hold of, now the subject of the police inquiry.
I can confirm that a firearm has been retrieved from that scene and will be forensically examined. We are not yet describing that as a pump action firearm, but clearly, as I've said, multiple shots have been fired from a firearm during that 6-minute or so period.
12 minutes of armed violence in Keam was played out in court today. A timeline of an atrocity.
After the Plymouth some things changed, but not enough. The UK made new rules about gun licenses, including checking people's social media history before giving them permission to own firearms. The police officers who gave Jake his gun license back were disciplined. But these changes only highlighted a painful truth. This tragedy might never have happened if the right precautions had been placed in from the start. The biggest problem, access to mental health care, still hasn't been fixed. The same long waiting lists that stopped Jake from getting help are still there. It's like having a hospital that can only treat 1 in every 10 people who need help. Mental health services still don't have enough money, staff, or resources to help everyone who needs them. The dark corners of the internet where Jake found his harmful beliefs are still out there too. Social media companies say they're trying to stop dangerous content, but it's like playing whack-a-mole. Shut down one harmful group and another pops up somewhere else. The same toxic ideas that influenced Jake are still reaching out to other vulnerable people. The incel phenomenon represents a complex web of social isolation, mental health struggles, and misguided beliefs. While Jake Davison's violent actions were extreme and not representative of all who identify as involuntarily celibate, the ideology itself reveals a troubling paradox. Individuals who feel deeply lonely and rejected often embrace beliefs that deepen their isolation. The core contradiction lies in how incels view relationships. They consider romantic connection a fundamental right, rather than something that develops through mutual respect and understanding. This sense of entitlement to women's attention and affection reveals a deeply flawed understanding of human relationships. By viewing women as commodities, they're being unfairly denied. Rather than equal human beings with their own agency, they create a self-fulfilling prophecy.
In most people, this materializes in severe cases of depression and increased risk of suicide. But for a small minority, these views start to express themselves in violent ways, and they start to think about conducting violent actions against women.
The tragic irony is that this very mindset they adopt to explain their loneliness, one of resentment, entitlement, and misogyny, becomes the biggest barrier to forming genuine connections that they desperately seek. This creates a devastating feedback loop. Rejection leads to bitterness, which leads to further rejection, deepening their commitment to harmful ideologies that only increase their isolation.
This is not the first time that the Incel movement, which started in the United States, has been linked to mass killings. Just 22 days ago, Davison was discussing US shooting sprees, claiming the UK had more guns than people think.
The incel ideology is really dangerous. It is a shared hatred of women that brings men together online, mainly, but very often takes them offline into abuse, harassment, and violence.
Beyond all the policy changes and system failures, there's a deeper human story here. The families who lost loved ones don't just deal with grief. They have to live with knowing their family members were taken from them in such a senseless way. The Keyham neighborhood where it all happened isn't just a place on a map anymore. It's a community where people still jump at loud noises, where empty spots at local shops remind everyone of who's missing. Ben and Michelle Parsonage survived being shot, but surviving means more than just healing from physical wounds. They, like many others in Plymouth, carry invisible scars. First responders who were there that day, healthcare workers who tried to save lives, neighbors who heard the shots, they all carry pieces of this tragedy with them.
A couple of the gunshots went off and I ran opposite a pub and the owner came out and he shouted at me. He just went, get in here now. And so I forward rolled into the pub and I literally clung underneath one of the pool tables, hung on for dear life, and I froze. He locked the door and he closed the windows. And my mum sent me a message saying, hide, stay safe, stay down, lock yourself away.
Even Jake's own family lives with a complicated mix of grief, guilt, and questions that will never be answered. They have to somehow process their own loss while knowing their relatives cause so much pain to others. This tragedy teaches us something crucial. Mental health care, public safety, and community support aren't separate issues. When one part of the system fails, it can create a devastating chain reaction. The Plymouth shooting isn't just about what happened on that summer evening. It's about all of us, how we support each other, how we spot signs that someone's struggling, and how we make sure our communities are places where tragedies like this become less likely. If any good can come from such a terrible event, it has to be that we learn these lessons and actually do something about them. Thanks for tuning in, you guys. What do you think we can do to prevent such tragedies? Can people like Jake Davison be stopped? Leave your thoughts in a comment down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe before you go. See you soon.